We're back with part 2 of the Daily Items interview with local school district superintendents about the state of cyber schools.
How about the Seals Road?
Yeah, thank you. The 2 years prior to last year, we were around 55 to 60, low 60s in regards to the outside cyber quantity of students that went beyond our school district to the public cyber world. Last year, we jumped up to a little over 100. So we had an increase of about 40 to 45 students last year. And that did start to decrease slightly by the end of the 2021 school year. We have seen that continually decrease over the summer, most likely as a response to less concerns about COVID. I would say, though, that COVID has definitely played a role in getting people to view technology enhancement, more of a comparison to what historically has been offered by school districts as more of an acceptable norm. A lot of people, from a societal standpoint, wouldn't have considered a cyber school option prior to the spring of 2020. They're a little bit desensitized to that now. In our school district, we look at it from the same standpoint that others have conveyed. What is the goal of education? That is what, from a societal standpoint, what is the goal? And we are trying to maximize the potential of students in a holistic manner. We're trying to obviously increase their academic successes, but we're also trying to focus on what they achieve as young people and what they can be in their life. And to echo other statements, we still feel as though that an in-person learning opportunity is going to provide much more of an all-encompassing experience. And one of the things that's a big factor for people to consider in society is the difference in the marketability skills of these business model cyber schools compared to your average school district. We just do not have that focus historically on that topic. And if you look at it from the standpoint of when we have people who are considering to go to outside cybers, we're trying to do our best as a school district and have our building level leaders and sometimes district leaders reach out to those families and create more of an informed decision on their part.
Did a lot of the school districts, were they kind of like at a disadvantage when COVID did strike because nobody was really prepared for online learning and all that, where cyber schools was way ahead on that? Is that also part of it?
I would say that that would absolutely be a factor. It would be the same if that question was in reverse to some outside cybers that were solely remote.
So the perfect storm that hit
Sure.
at the same time.
Yeah.
And now go to the outlining areas as far as Mifflinburg. So how is it?
I think my colleagues have spoken very well on a lot of these topics. I will say that in Mifflinburg, a number of years ago, probably around 2011, we decided to really try to compete with cyber schools. We recognized that our costs were out of control, with a total of 70 or so students who were attending cyber schools. And so we decided to form our own. And as Dr. Jankowski pointed out, we take a look at what education means. What does it mean to educate a child? And what do we value? Some of that comes down to the things that you believe in. And as educators, we believe that learning is a social activity and it's interactive. We recognize the value of collaboration among students and their ability to learn together. So when we formed our own ELearning Academy, we deliberately made requirements for our e-learning students to have social gathering opportunities, to actually come into a lab periodically, check in with the teacher, and form relationships, because so much of education has to do with the relationships and the bonds between individuals, including the teacher. Our competition seemed to pay off initially, and as of the 1920 school year, we only had, I'd say, 48 students who were attending outside cyber schools. The pandemic definitely threw a wrench into everything for all of us, and as of last year, our high water mark had 94 students attending outside cyber schools. So the cost factor is certainly something we can talk about all day long. It is nearly impossible to budget, and As of last year, we had to come up with about $815,000 that's not part of our program to simply pay for that matter of choice. And so it really leads to a lot of frustration. And I think internally we're very proud of the product we developed. We feel it definitely offers a much more well-rounded and stronger education for students who want to choose that option. But we continue to believe that education involves interacting with others.
Obviously,
And I'm not sure that I can add much more than the colleagues have said, and I'm sitting around here hearing numbers and feel a little bit blessed because our numbers prior to COVID were under 40. Outside cybers during COVID ended up being 49. So we added about 11 students. However, what we saw our inside cyber program go from about 40 to 101. So when we look at those costs, it cost us about $145,000 to educate those students on our own cyber cost program. However, if they would have all gone to an outside cyber, that would have been attuned to about $920,000. So yes, we saw an increase in our budget of about $200,000, which is, as everyone else has said, is not easy to budget for. However, our costs were not quite as there. But I want to go back to something that Mr. Campbell said about the programs and everyone else relative to the quality. I don't think anyone here is attacking the idea of school choice. We know that we don't have the ability to be everything to everyone based on our sizes and our demographics, and many students have gone through our own Warrior Run Cyber Academy and been very successful because they chose the cyber program for various reasons. We had one student who graduated 2 years ago who was at the national level competing in rodeo, but he really felt that having a Warrior Run education was important. He was able to stay connected with Warrior Run. He certainly could have gone out to an outside cyber, but we were able to provide quality education for him. There's been other students who have gone before him and after him based on employment issues, some personal circumstances, and I would say that they chose cyber for the right reason. And the fact that everyone sitting around this table has a program that can do that, we believe that students and parents who are in our district should have to be looking at our options first. We know everyone chooses cyber for very different reasons. However, some of those reasons are not in the best interest of the students, and they do end up coming back to us at some point, and then as a district, we're responsible for remediation. If they would have stayed with us, we would be able to track them, be able to provide them interventions along the way. And that's challenging when we're trying to accommodate 1,500, 2,000 other students at the same time.
Last but not least.
As everyone said, my story is very similar. Our numbers were very low. 2017-18, we had 14 kids, and really it affected our bottom line, our budget. It wasn't until last year when COVID hit, we actually had a growth the year before COVID in 19-20, and where it doubled, and it really affects our budget. Even with low numbers, you can't budget for a 14 or 50% increase, 100% increase. You know, my biggest issues is looking into this, and we've done everything that the other schools are doing. We're trying to recruit our kids back. We're trying to sell our programs. We feel we created a cyber school that we man with our own teachers. We hold students accountable. We're making phone calls home. We know their attendance. We know their progress. And we're communicating with families. I know for sure that doesn't happen with other cyber schools. And we're doing it for a third of the cost. It baffles me that we're not on the same playing field. Where it might cost me $12,000 to educate a student. That's with all the overhead. I know it doesn't cost another cyber school, outside cyber school, a reach cyber school, $12,000 to educate our kid who is sitting in Catalyst or in Leesburg. So that baffles me. And again, some of the accountability. They're just the things that we're accountable for. Even for, you know, we've had this discussions with legislators. And I've had a legislator say to me, well, some of the kids that are going to cyber school aren't your top-notch kids. They're the ones staying at Southern Columbia. Well, and that might be true. But, you know, we have a lot of kids who also struggle that are at Southern Columbia, and we're accountable to them. So it shouldn't matter what the kid is or how the kid does. You know, wherever the kid is, should be accountable. If they're at Milton, Milton's accountable for that kid. And it just doesn't seem that. As a high school principal, I was a long-time high school principal, and it would baffle me where a kid would leave Southern Columbia because for whatever reason they were unhappy. We were trying supports, trying to do all kinds of things. They wanted to try cyber for a year. They would come back after that year and have almost nothing complete, no credits transferred. They have to go to school an extra year. And for a kid who's struggling like that, when they get to that point, it's very easy for them to wave the flag and say, I quit. And then what happens? So, I think level playing field, accountability, we just don't have that. And that's what frustrates me. Beyond the costs, beyond the increase, we can battle that. But it doesn't seem like we're winning that war. But it's the accountability or lack of accountability. We have to be accountable for so many other areas, and cyber school's not.
So with that being said, and I'm sure again you guys are probably thinking about the same thing, the numbers and numbers and numbers, but some districts will outlast other districts if it continued and if the numbers continue to climb. But some of the school districts like High Mountain or like Mount Carmel, what's the projected? And I think this is the biggest part of this now is forget what happened. It's in the rearview mirror. Let it there. But moving into the future, what could happen to some of your school districts as far as quality of education? Because like you said, if you can't hire, if you're spending an extra $800,000 a year and you can't hire, or you have to start making furloughs, what happens at this point? And I think this is what parents should know as well.
So I'll talk about that topic because it's really close to my heart. The last 2 years here at Shikellamy, we've had to furlough teachers, we've had to cut staff, we've had to eliminate offerings, educational offerings. We've had to restructure buildings and close buildings. And I'm going to give you a number. Over those 2 years, all of the things I just said, we cut $2.4 million out of our annual budget. Last year, we sent $2.4 million to outside cyber.
So with that being said,
so my
point, to be honest, it hurts your school district.
So my point is, yes, everything that was done was not good for kids. I think we've selected the things that what hurts children the least, but everything that had to be done impacts kids. And if you look at the state models of statewide charter schools and what they're projecting, how much money is going to be going out, it continues to go up. So we don't have anything left. Like, there's nothing left to cut in this district. So what happens when that outside charter school number continues to rise? So my point is, it's not sustainable. So legislators, we've been dealing with this for 15 years. We're at a breaking point.
And that's what I'm asking. So obviously, I close to Shikellamy because it covered, so I know. So when you say the savings, I think people automatically, I think every school district would probably agree. People think you saved it, you put it away for a rainy day. But that money that is gone now that you've already spent. So you're back to zero. So now let's just say something were to happen and an outbreak happens and another 50 kids decide to go in. Where do you get the money and what happens to programs? And Dave, I guess this would go to you as well. If teachers aren't applying, is it because they're afraid that they're going to come in and get laid off?
I don't want to speak for the group, but speaking as a father of a child who just graduated 3 years ago from the education field, I think public education has been given sometimes black eye by legislators, the perception. There's just not the number of students enrolling. I know at Millersville, when my daughter graduated there, they were down almost 50%. I can't speak for Bloomsburg, but I know there. That's the issue. And as schools are furloughing, there are children leaving those schools that used to go into college and go in education. But they're seeing the cuts, and they don't see a future career supporting the family being a teacher anymore. And that's the real issue. And I don't know how we can combat that. It's really alarming, the amount of applications. I believe one of my colleagues was discussing how he had 15 applications for a social studies position. When I applied for a social studies position in 1989, there were 222. I had 4 math applications for an opening. 1 wasn't qualified. That's scary. And there is more that our legislation, Harrisburg, the governor's office, the Department of Education, they need to come to local areas and really get back in touch with what's going on. And as long as we have people changing this, changing that, and giving a perception that we're not doing it right, we're just going to keep spiraling out of control.
Some of the areas obviously could sustain a little bit more, like Stevens Grove, Sunbury, but I'm not sure, like Mount Carmel and Milton and out your guys' way, and Mifflinburg. Do you look at these numbers now and say 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Like I know when you presented when you presented the budget, that you said the projected would be broken this year. Like, I mean, I don't think people truly understand that if that happens, what that is. So if you guys look at your budgets now because of this and say, I don't know what we're going to do here in 5 years or 6 years or whatever the case may be.
I'll say that we do that every year. Every year when we do our budget analysis, we project out 5 years. And for the past 10 years, every 5-year projection shows us totally out of funds within that 5-year period. So what it does for us is it creates challenges, the need to become creative and find things to either cut or create greater efficiencies with. And we've been very fortunate over the past 10 years that we've been able to come up with things. But it's always very frightening when you look 5 years down the road, and it drives really a constant need to change.
We do use a 5-year budget model, and I can't remember the gentleman's name from Penn State University, but it was a tool that he created that was available to school districts to access, and that is the budget model we use. And I know that we talked a lot about the education piece, and there's 2 areas I'd like to go a little deeper is, you know, Francis, when you talk about $790,000 for a taxpayer, that's 5 mills in Milton. So, you know, roughly $150,000 a mill, divide that by 790,000, you're talking 5 mills. We also are constrained at what our index is and how much we can raise taxes. So yes, we do, as Dan said, we've got to look at programs and positions and Jason and what can we do to get back that 790,000. The piece that I want to talk about that has to do with Jim is we are offering cyber school. And here's what happened this year. As we looked at the continuum of fear for COVID, we also were able to more closely keep an eye on those children that were in our cyber programs. As of March, I believe, we had over 450 home visits because we were worried if kids weren't checking in. And so now we were going to homes and saying, what do you need? Like, do you need internet? Are there too many people in your house on internet? And we had local community partners that worked with us and said, we'll help you, Kathy, we'll help the families. If you think about what Joanne Troutman's leadership did under United Way, they helped us find funding for hotspots. We worked with our service providers. We took food to homes. We took clothing to homes. When you look at that opportunity that a school district who's running their own cyber school has for their families from a social and emotional wellness piece, that's not happening in an external cyber school. They're statewide schools, and so they have no idea if one of our kids is hungry or somebody in the house is sick or they don't have internet, other than they're reporting the truancy, and now we're saying, hey, what the heck's going on? But that, to me, was one of the silver linings for all of us in our own cyber programs, is that we really could keep an eye on our children and their families. We drove meals to houses if we had to. We surrounded our children with all the services we thought they could benefit from. And that included not only our home and school visitor, but also our school resource officers. It was a silver lining, as Dave said earlier. Good things came out of this, and it did increase our family and community relationships. So, I'm proud of our programs and what we're able to do. And yet, but the ultimate is there is an impact on the taxpayer and what that may mean to their July bill based on how many kids are enrolled in these external cyber programs.
Be sure to check out the final installment of this conversation at dailyitem.com.